In today's video, we have more updates from around the NHL on more roster cuts coming from NHL training camps, including several players that require NHL waivers and could be claimed by other teams. Plus, we have some latest NHL rumors, including teams like the Montreal Canadiens, Minnesota Wild, Nashville Predators, and St. Louis Blues. We'll jump into all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot of news from around the league today, including several roster cuts, many players requiring waivers, and some latest rumors from around the league as well. So let's jump right in here and get started with the roster cuts and players requiring NHL waivers. First of all, the Montreal Canadiens have made a slew of roster cuts, and several of those players do require waivers, including veteran defenseman Karl Alzner, veteran forward Dale Weiss. They've also got Matthew Pekka, Xavier Ouellet, and Phil Varone. For the most part, none of these cuts are super surprising. I guess maybe Matthew Pekka, to a degree, probably stood the best chance out of all of them to make the team. Obviously, these guys are all going to be available on the waiver wire until noon Eastern time tomorrow, so we'll see if any of them are claimed or not. Obviously, this is good news for a player like Nick Suzuki, who's still on the main roster. I know I did mention the other day that Elliot Friedman had mentioned that he might be going to Laval, but I misread that part of the blog. He was actually referring to Jake Evans, not Suzuki, so I apologize for the mix-up there, but Suzuki's certainly still in camp, still fighting for a roster spot, and still looking pretty solid. There's yet to be a decision made on his future, but I think the odds of him sticking with the Habs main roster, at least getting a tryout for the beginning of the year, are probably looking pretty decent right now. Same with Kale Fleury on the blue line, so I guess we'll see, but many Habs players on the waiver wire today. Of course, we've also had some cuts out of Ottawa, including guys like Parker Kelly, Marcus Hogberg, and Nick Paul, who does require waivers. So Nick Paul's on the waiver wire with Ottawa. He's been around up and down several times here, up and down between the AHL and NHL. Of course, he was one of the main pieces. They came to Ottawa in the Jason Spezza trade many years ago and has really still not yet become a full-time NHL player. So I guess the odds of that happening are probably slim, and with the amount of young top rookies in the forward group of the Senators, it's going to be that much more difficult for Paul moving forward. So I guess we'll see. Now, the Colorado Avalanche have also sent one of their top prospects, Martin Kaut, down to start the season with the Colorado Eagles, so he'll be starting in the American Hockey League. They've also sent top prospect Bowen Byram back to junior. He's going to go play in the Western Hockey League with the Vancouver Giants. Of course, they are one of the stronger teams across Canadian junior hockey, so he mentioned a quote from him that anything short of winning like a league championship and a Memorial Cup would be considered a failure. He'll certainly be one of the top players for Team Canada at the World Juniors, and like I said, his team's going to stand a chance to win a lot of stuff this year, including a possible national championship. So we'll see, but Byram's going to go back to junior. He had a great experience in camp, looked really good, and he'll certainly be one of their top prospects, hopefully in the next year or so, to make the roster. The Chicago Blackhawks have also made some cuts. They've sent top prospect Adam Boqvist and Alexis Sorella down to the minors, so they're going to be starting in the AHL. Of course, this is Boqvist's first pro season. He played a year of junior last year with the London Knights. Of course, now he'll start the year in AHL. I don't think it'll be too long before he gets into the NHL, but I would imagine he'll probably spend the bulk of the year in the American Hockey League, but probably get some looks at the NHL level, I would think, before the year is out. And they also have cut John Quenneville, and he does require waivers, so he'll be on the waiver wire for today, and if he's not claimed, will be assigned to their American Hockey League affiliate as well. Now on the waiver wire today as well, it does show the Boston Bruins having Alex Petrovic on there. Now, they have not officially announced a signing, but there'd be no other reason to have him on waivers unless they did sign him to a contract like we had discussed before, that they were likely leaning towards doing that. So they must have signed him, just hasn't been announced as of yet. We'll probably get that news later today. Perhaps by the time this video is posted, they'll announce a signing, but he will have to clear waivers before they can officially put him on their roster or assign him to their American Hockey League affiliate, depending on where they want to start him off for the season. But either way, it does look as though the Bruins have signed Petrovic off that professional tryout. He'll stick around with the Bruins longer term here, since they do have some injuries to start the year on that blue line. The Edmonton Oilers have cut forward Kyler Yamamoto. He's going to be starting the year in the American Hockey League as well. I do think that's probably best for him. I think he needs some more work, some more seasoning, and hopefully another year of pro hockey in the AHL will do him good to help him move up to the NHL roster. But I know Ken Holland is certainly going to be taking a different approach to how they develop their prospects than the previous regime in Edmonton. He's certainly more fond of letting them get their time at the AHL level and really get the seasoning that they require so they can come up and be successful. So Bakersfield's likely going to have a few top prospects for the Oilers for the coming year. So they should be a pretty fun American Hockey League team to watch. Hopefully he can develop well down there and get himself an opportunity either later in the year or as soon as next year, depending on how things go. A couple other top prospects were returned to their junior teams as well, including Dylan Cousins today of the Buffalo Sabres and Ryan Suzuki of the Carolina Hurricanes. Both players were reported to have pretty decent training camps. I think their teams were impressed with their efforts. Great experience for them to get into their training camp and see what it's like to be in the pro side of the game. But they will return to their junior clubs and have another year of junior seasoning under their belt before they likely turn pro after one more year. So we'll see how things go with those two guys. But another couple top prospects. I know Team Canada is probably happy to see them go back to their junior teams as well, because it'll be a big help when it comes to the World Junior Tournament. Now, as I mentioned, we have some latest NHL rumors as well. We have 4 teams we're going to cover today. Let's kick things off with Montreal Canadiens. Now, as we discussed a couple of days ago, it was being reported that the Habs were looking to move it forward, and they had way too many guys on NHL contracts. Obviously, we saw some cuts today that we just discussed a few moments ago, including Weiss and Pekka. That'll certainly whittle that down a little bit, but they still have more than they need, especially when you factor in Nick Suzuki having such a strong camp so far. And it's been believed, like I reported the other day, that Jonathan Drouin's name has been out there in the rumor mill as somebody who they would consider trading and would be available for the right deal. It wasn't quite clear exactly what the asking price would be or what they would want in return. Obviously, it wouldn't be a goaltending. They're pretty set in that regard for the time being. For the most part, their defense has improved year over year, but they could certainly use another rear guard back there, and they could also use another forward if they do trade him out. Maybe they want some more experience, but at the same time, maybe they want to give their young guys more opportunity. So it's not quite clear exactly what the return package that they're kind of desiring on him if they did move him, but it's been reported by Eric Engels again now with Sportsnet that he's contacted several other NHL GMs around the NHL, and they have confirmed that his name is certainly out there, and there has been some trade talks around him. Now, of course, we don't know how serious things have gotten or how close a deal has come or anything to that nature, but it is confirmed with other teams saying in their discussions with Montreal that he is a player that's been out there and very well could be traded. We know he's had an up and down type of relationship with the fans and with his play on the ice really since he's arrived in Montreal, and he does have a lot of talent. He might be able to get things going. I don't think they're real eager to make a move, but they very well might if the right deal comes along. But at the same time, we'll see how things go. They might be patient, see how the younger players start the year before they jump the gun here and trade a more experienced player like Drouin, who could be possibly more productive than one of their younger players if they're not quite ready. So we'll see, but there's more reports out there on Drouin that he is available should the right deal come along. Now let's jump over and take a look at some other teams as well. Pierre Lebrun was talking on Insider Trading about the Minnesota Wild. Now, of course, they have a new GM in Billy Guerin. He made his first big move, extending Jared Spurgeon on a long-term contract extension, and it's believed that he kind of wants to obviously move this team in the right direction. Right now, personally, I think Minnesota could struggle a lot this year, but he's looking to acquire a top center or a number 2 center, so a top 6 center iceman, which really, how difficult is that? Quite difficult. They're not easy to find when teams have those guys, especially on decent contracts. They're certainly not fond of moving them. So acquiring that type of player is something that probably a lot of teams desire, but obviously a lot of teams around the NHL are set and have their core players that they're happy with. But when you look around the NHL and you kind of see, okay, who might have a center who might be capable of playing in a top 6 role that might have struggled or might be on an unfavorable contract or something maybe that might be a little bit easier to attain without giving up the moon to get them. I mean, because it was mentioned that they would probably prefer to use a combination of picks and prospects or maybe some minor pieces off the roster to make the acquisition. That didn't really want to trade out another top player like a Jason Zucker, for example. I know he came close to being traded a few times, but now we're kind of led to believe he's likely untouchable, which is probably good for his peace of mind. But obviously sometimes to get value you have to give up value. So what would they get in return? What could they possibly go after here? The only thing that really comes to my mind is a player who would fit that kind of description and maybe be available would be Kyle Turris in Nashville. Obviously, they signed Matt Duchene this year as a free agent. They have Ryan Johansson. They're both making $8 million. Kyle Turris is around the $6 million mark. That's a lot of money for a number 3 center, unless Duchene or Johansson or Turris play the wing, which really doesn't seem likely. I'm not really sure how the Predators are going to have their roster set if they keep Turris. Now, of course, like I said, based on last year's performance, the contract with Turris is not the most favorable, but at the same time, it's something that he could certainly bounce back and really make it look like a pretty good deal or a bargain deal, depending on what he's able to do. And based on his previous results, $6 million is not terrible. He was a pretty solid number one, number two guy in Ottawa for many years. Now, of course, one of his original line mates when he got to Nashville was Kevin Fiala. They had great chemistry, and he's now in Nashville, so they very well might have a reunion there. That's just some thoughts. I mean, obviously, there's other guys around the league that maybe they're looking at. I don't have any sources or no reports to say that they're looking at Turris, but based on what they're apparently looking to trade, when you look around the league, that's just something that jumped out to me that maybe be something that they would look at as a possible acquisition. If they can make it work for the cap, they might not have to give up anything too substantial. But typically, when it comes to getting a top center iceman, you're giving up a lot, several assets to make that acquisition. And I'm just not really sure that Minnesota has that type of assets available that they really want to part with. So we'll see what happens, but it's out there that Billy Guerin wants to attract a top two center iceman for his club, which really shouldn't come as a huge surprise. Now, staying with the Nashville Predators here for a moment, obviously Kyle Turris is a contract they're going to be taking a look at, but it's a little bit surprising to many around the league that the Roman Josi extension has not been completed yet. He's been in his final year of his contract, been eligible to sign an extension since July 1st. We're now ready to start the season here in just a matter of a few days, and it's not done yet. Now, based on reports from Insider Trading, it's been believed that Nashville's offering, I think they said it was around probably between 8 to 8.5, and for Josi to really consider signing, it sounds like it's going to have to start with a number 9 or more. They'll likely end up being the third highest paid defenseman, is kind of what they're looking at behind guys like Carlson and Drew Doughty. So, could Nashville pony up that much money for Roman Josi? He's an excellent defenseman, at times very underrated. I'm not sure about making him the number 3 paid defenseman. I know Preds fans probably have maybe a little bit more appreciation for him than other fans from around the NHL because they see him play more. He is really solid, I understand that, but I don't know. Obviously there might be some hesitation there. So obviously when a player needs a contract and they're having a hard time coming to it, that quite often links to trade rumors. No, right now there's nobody out there saying that they think Josi's going to be traded, but as time goes on, if they do have more difficulty coming to terms, obviously it could lead to that, but I can't see the Predators going down that road. They're expected to have a really solid season. I've pegged them to have a really strong year, be another playoff team, be one of the top Western Conference teams again, so therefore it wouldn't make sense to trade their captain or one of their top players, but that's certainly not something I foresee happening at all, but it's just unusual that the contract's not done yet, but it looks as though they're going to have to pony up some big bucks if they want to get him locked up to a long-term deal. Now, speaking of defensemen who would like to re-signing in a long-term deal, that leads us to the Blues and their captain as well, Alex Pietrangelo. There's been a lot of talk about him and his future with St. Louis ever since the trade a few days ago with the Carolina Hurricanes, where they acquired Justin Falk and immediately signed him to a 7-year contract extension at $6.5 million. Now, when you look at the right side of their defense, that now gives them Pietrangelo, Parayko, Justin Falk, and they get Robert Bortuzzo, who's really a pretty solid, serviceable number 3 guy as well. Meanwhile, the left side's a little bit weaker, a little bit older with Jay Bouwmeester, Carl Gunnarsson. Vince Dunn obviously is pretty young and dynamic, so he's going to be good for a long time. But overall, it's just kind of creates a whole new dynamic on that Blues blue line. And people wonder, can they now afford to pay Pietrangelo now that they got Falk in the picture and they're paying him? He's not the only UFA coming up after this year. They've also got Braden Shen in the forward group as well, and they do have some tough decisions to make. Before the trade ever took place with Carolina, we did hear comments from GM Doug Armstrong saying that he had talked to Shen and Pietrangelo briefly, just to kind of get the ball rolling, kind of outline their vision and whatnot about, a potential contract extension. I don't think they've ever exchanged term or money or anything that, formal or serious, but they just had some brief talks just to kind of let them know that he was very interested in keeping him in the fold and re-signing them beyond the coming year to an extension. But it just makes you wonder what the plans are, and if the Blues happen to start slow and stumble out of the blocks like they did last year, could Doug Armstrong this time pull the trigger? Last year he was very patient, didn't blow up the roster even though he had plenty of opportunity. There was a lot of deals that were reportedly very close to happening and didn't. He decided to be patient and hold off, and I'm sure he's really glad he did. But I think he's a realist and knows that the odds of that happening again this year, having a second half comeback and winning another championship if they start slow again, probably isn't realistic. So if that happens, could they maybe move their captain? There was a ton of rumors about him last year. There was a couple teams that were real close to making the trade to acquire him. I don't think that they're in a situation right now where they're seriously considering it, but it just makes you wonder with the cap where it is. There's some rumors about what the cap's going to be next year. probably looking at a $2 to $3 million increase, which isn't huge. So when you factor in where they're at, needing to sign Shen, Pietrangelo, longer term, it just might be difficult for them to do. And with the Falk acquisition, just kind of complicates things. So you can't help but wonder what GM Doug Armstrong's up to, and if he would make that consideration later in the year if things aren't going well. Let me know what you think. Does Pietrangelo re-sign with the Blues? Or if they start slow and things aren't going well for the coming year, could he be traded? Let me know what you think. We'll discuss further down in the comments. So that is all your latest news updates for today. If you're new to the channel, make sure you consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. We post all the latest news from around the NHL on a daily basis. We'll keep you all up to date around all 31 NHL teams. Thank you very much for watching, everybody, and I will catch you next time.